Thanks so much for joining us on another episode of Curiosity, Not Judgment. My name is Virga.
And I'm Gary.
We wanted to talk today about cognitive dissonance. It's a fun word. It's a big word, big series of words with a bigger definition. And so I know that you have it pulled up, so I'm going to let you read it right from the get-go so we are on the same page with what we're talking about.
All right, cognitive dissonance. It's a noun. It's the psychological discomfort felt when behavior does not conform with values, feelings, or beliefs.
So I think this was first introduced to me in a book that my husband was reading about alcohol. So he had gone through this book that was really transformational for him, and it was talking about the cognitive dissonance with drinking and alcohol consumption, where you believe it to be all of these things. You believe it to be a social lubricant. You believe it to be a substance that will help you fit in better with the crowd, that will de-stress you, all of these things. But the reality is, the science behind it is, it's something completely different. And so there is a cognitive dissonance between what you have experienced and what you believe to be true versus the fact of the matter. And so that was my first exposure to it. And then I think you and I had a next exposure with a different book that we had been studying as part of a group.
Yeah. The book, which book was that?
It was The Other Half of Church.
Oh yeah, The Other Half of Church. Yes, and cognitive dissonance there is more of a, what do you believe? There's the other part of that is old ideas, right? Mm-hmm. And what about your current belief system appears to not be working anymore?
Right.
And then there's the other examples that people in the article I was reading give about the fact that, you know, you want to go do something, but your brain says don't do it for some reason. Or you receive new information that's outside of the outline of information and the very convenient labels that you have put on something in the past. So in other words, the outside information is different than what you know to be true at the time.
Yeah. So I think a good example of that is when you come across somebody who is on a street corner, they're asking for money. You know, you've got part of this, I don't know, sense in you that you want to help, but then on the other hand, you have seen or heard stories about addiction, or, you know, this person's just surely going to squander the money. And so you have this little war within your brain, within your emotions, within your will to say, I want to do something impactful. I want to do something helpful. And yet science or news stories or data has shown something different. And so it's a cognitive dissonance.
It is a cognitive dissonance. And you know, so we just recently had a party at our house, and then there was extra food left over. So, you know, Andrea and I were sitting there looking at each other, and the grandkids were there, and we said, what should we do with the food? It's like, okay, let's pack it up. So we made a little assembly line, and we did turkey and cheese sandwiches, and we had potato salad. We put it in little container cups. We had fruit, and we just took it down to Central and Wyoming, which is a place in Albuquerque, New Mexico, if you're not listening to it there, which is a place where you can find a lot of homeless. And we just started handing it out. And so we making the decision as to who we gave it to caused us some good cognitive dissonance and some good things to talk about. And so, you know, it comes to know, you know, what is your thinking about people who are on the street? If there was somebody doing, you know, actively using drugs, do you go approach them, you know, versus do you more tend towards a woman with children or a single man or a group of people versus one or two? So we had all of those decisions to make as we were handing food out.
Yeah. And I have to say, like, this is where my brain goes. You say potato salad, and I instantly think, oh, goodness, if some agency within the city government found out you're handing out potato salad, you get slapped with some sort of fine because of refrigeration and mayonnaise and all of the stuff around it. And so it's even the, you know, it's the cognitive dissonance around you want to do something, you've got extra food, but now you're not within the parameters of food safety or whatever. And so it's all of the things that have to be considered in these types of situations.
Yeah, which, by the way, I tend to ignore those kinds of little rules because I worked in a homeless shelter for, you know, 12 years and handed out food. And it was like, you know, we couldn't receive some things because of those rules that would have been very useful to be able to hand out. So I'm a little jaded with respect to that, being on the other side of that. So we did hand it out, and I hoped no one got sick.
Indeed.
But I'm sure it was very heavy. It was, ironically, the fruit was a big hit.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
fresh produce.
I understand that that's hard to get
Yes,
when you're on the street. I just didn't expect that folks would really like it as much. And quite frankly, we hadn't ever done fruit before. We just happened to have a big bunch of fruit that we needed to get rid of, so we cut it up into smaller bits and put, you know, grapes and strawberries and cantaloupe in little baggies, and oh my goodness, those people were just like, wow. Anyway, the point is, what was our judgments? We talk about tolerance, and is, you know, we talked about this last time, is, you know, what part of tolerance is us judging that we are better that they need tolerance. Right? I mean, that in itself is cognitive dissonance, right? Sure. Because who am I to say that I'm better than any other person on the planet? Right.
Yeah, to put yourself in a position that you're going to ride in and save the day with your food distribution.
Exactly, which didn't happen.
Right.
I might have helped out a couple people temporarily, and that's fine, and that was the purpose. But I don't pretend to think that I'm going to turn someone's life around. However, there is a school of thought that every nice thing that you do causes a ripple effect. And if everybody was doing nice things as opposed to mean things or indifferent things or ignoring people on purpose, that that you could cause, you know, better actions in the world, even by small actions like that.
This brings to mind a video that I saw that it's a little one-off from what you're explaining, but it just made such an impact on me. I was literally in tears watching this video. So I'd seen it as part of a women's conference, and it was a British production, and it was a video shot, an experimental video shot in a subway situation where they had a stairwell going up, some steep stairs coming out of like the subway corridor, and then the escalator. And there was someone at the base saying the escalator was for the men only, and making the women take the stairs. And it was a social experiment to see, first off, were the women going to comply? And in this video, every single one of them did. They were angry, they were frustrated, but they went up the stairs. And, you know, would the men do anything? Would they have anything to say about it? But I think the part that made me just grieve is that there were some handicap issues. There were some women that clearly had some disabilities. And then you had mothers with strollers that were carrying young children or had luggage or something like that. And the way that the women bonded together to help each other up the stairs, I was just weeping over it. And these social experiments, while they're interesting to watch to see kind of what is the way that we react as humanity, there are certain things, there are certain characteristics that are so deeply ingrained in us, and we have these cognitive dissonance moments all the time. Are you going to buck the system? Are you going to say no to an injustice? Are you going to stand up for somebody who is not being treated fairly? All of the things, and it is a battle of the mind.
Well, and I think we get trained these days. Sorry, I swallowed something inadvertently earlier. I think we sometimes rationalize and say that, look, I'm on this purpose. I mean, you see this in movies all the time, but I'm doing good, and they end up doing really, really bad stuff because they're the savior of the earth, and you know, Well, we have those kinds of things too. So with the potato salad, for instance, it's like, should I, you know, am I going to obey some little thing that says, oh, watch out, there's mayonnaise in that thing that could spoil, or am I going to just bypass that and just do it anyway? And those, we sometimes rationalize, okay, well, look, it's potato salad, I just won't even go out. You know, see, and that's where I think we get in trouble, is we see something as a distraction, we see something as something that's not off of what we need to do, or we say, you know, it's not worth the hassle. It's not worth it to me to worry about that. It's not worth it to me to try to correct this person that this escalator is for men and women, and try to get involved. We say, well, I don't want to get involved. Right.
This isn't my concern.
This isn't my concern. This isn't my place. When really, in society, one could argue that everything should be everyone's concern on some level. Right? And sometimes you do need to see, when you see injustice, when you see someone in help, you need to stop and help. You know, I was at Starbucks the other day talking with a friend, And I saw the person coming in with a load of dishes. It was one of the employees there. And it was a Flying Star, excuse me, a local shop. But they clearly were going to struggle with the door. So I jumped up and opened the door. And the person I was talking to said, wow, you know, that's pretty amazing that you would help them. I mean, it's their job to figure out how to get the dishes into the door. And I was thinking, wow, okay, that's a interesting way to think about that, right? But that's the kind of thing that we're talking about.
Absolutely.
The article I was reading pointed out an old one I had read years ago. It was a Princeton experiment with seminary students. And I think everybody knows, whether you are a big Bible reader or not, the story of the Good Samaritan. But the Good Samaritan helps out someone who's on the side of the road, and someone, by the way, who is not someone that they would normally deal with.
Right.
Somebody that they should hate.
By the population.
Right. And so anyway, that story. So these seminary students are told, hey, you need to go teach a class on this right now. One of the professors got ill and you need to go, that's the subject, you need to run across campus and go do this right now. And these seminary students are like, wow, what an opportunity for me to go and do this. This will elevate me and my respect for Well, and of course they stage a sick person or somebody who needs help on the way to teach the course, and only 10% of them offered aid along the way to teach a principle that they don't do in practice. And I think we often do that. We think we're good people and we would do this in this situation, and we even teach our children and our colleagues and family members, this is what you should do. But then when we're presented with the situation ourselves, we don't do it.
Well, so to me, that's where the curious questions really start. Why don't we get involved, and why aren't we more prone to jump in to help? Because I think our heart's cry really is to see justice. We want to see people protected. We want to see the innocent safe, all of those things. And yet there is that switch that kind of happens in the brain, say, maybe I'll be in danger. I don't know if I should get involved. Whatever the reasoning is that we use to bypass our compassion, it kicks in. And so that's really, for me, where the curiosity happens. I don't know how many studies there have been around, you know, this particular situation where there's clearly someone in need and they are videotaping a scene, and how many people will stop to render aid. And the percentage is always ridiculously low, and it's so sad. And I think to myself, you know, am I kidding myself that I would, of course I'd jump in to help, you know, because that's my gut check, right? Like, of course I would jump in to help. But if I were presented with a scenario, would there be those cognitive dissonant issues within my own brain that would keep me from taking action?
Well, and here's the other one too. And sometimes I'll be in a situation and I'll just pass by, and then I'll get a tinge later. I should have stopped. We should use those and think, okay, you know, the next time I will, and commit, because there's that whole fake it till you make it. In other words, even if you don't think your actions are in tune with what your beliefs are, as you're just saying, if you do it, you can actually start aligning your actions with beliefs, and it's actually easier to change your beliefs by your actions than your actions by your beliefs. In other words, saying you want to do something in the future is harder than if you start just doing it. It actually has the effect of changing your beliefs. And you'll probably have some good experiences along the way, which is a self-enforcing virtuous cycle. But the key is, go do something nice for someone. When you see someone who needs help, stop and help.
Well, and I think some of the internal curious questions, like maybe you've missed an opportunity. Maybe you have that twinge that you're referring to. You saw a situation, you wanted to act, but you didn't for whatever reason, and then that twinge hits. And I think that's where, again, some of the curiosity can come forward. It's like, okay, why didn't I?
Why didn't I?
What was the fear factor? What was the reasoning?
Was I in too much of a hurry?
Right.
Was I other things to do, other things on my mind?
And I think ultimately, if it boils down to fear, where did that fear originate? I think that's a big one. I often wonder, you know, if I were to see a situation where a woman was being yanked or pulled by a man, clearly treating her inappropriately, would it be wise for me as a woman to jump in, right? Like, these are some of the things that I think of when I see some of these scenarios played out. And what is my role? how do I use my voice? How do I use my voice effectively? How do I use my person, my body effectively? And am I more concerned about safeguarding myself than I am for helping someone in distress? And, you know, there's a laundry list of questions, I suppose, that you have to really process to see if you're going to get yourself engaged into certain scenarios.
Well, and this is something you can do some thinking ahead of time and saying, okay, look, I can at least shine a light on the situation by calling it out and saying from a safe distance, hey, what are you doing? Stop that. Do you need help? I'm calling 911 or something, in a place where you could run away or get away or something if the person started coming after you, and making the situation about you and your safety as opposed to the other person's. But think of the alternative. You do nothing. What's going to happen? Yeah. You know, so I think that there's levels of engagement. You started talking about, do you go physically intervene? Maybe not. It's like the, you know, I'm not a strong swimmer, right? But a strong swimmer might have a good shot at going in and helping somebody who's drowning. May not be the best idea for me to do, but I can call for help. I can get the lifeguard there. I can do other things. So what can we do, and then commit that if you're in that situation that you'll at least do that.
I have a very real example. It just came into my mind with this. So this is not a hypothetical. This is something I witnessed. I didn't act, and I still question what was my appropriate response or what should it have been. So I was asked to do a presentation in a classroom. And in the classroom, the teacher was present. The teacher was in the room. And there was this bullying situation that was taking place. So there was this kid that came up and wanted to sit in this seat. And, you know, one of the smart aleck boys pulled the seat out so he can't sit there. And, you know, it's kind of a 3-on-1 bully situation. And I felt my face get flushed. I was angry. I'm like, ugh. Like I wanted to go over there and say something, but it wasn't my classroom and the teacher was present. And so that was the moment of cognitive dissonance. Like, should I have said something? Was it my place to say something? Clearly it didn't get addressed. And so how do you deal with life's injustices, I suppose, in that scenario?
Well, so, I mean, right? And so if you go through that scenario, it's like, okay, first you give a glance at the teachers, see if they're even paying attention. You know, unfortunately, teachers have a lot to deal with these days.
Sure.
And they may not have even seen it. Second, you can inform or ask the question, are you going to do something about this? Third, you could say, can I go do something about this, and get the permission of the person who's supposedly in charge of the room? Or fourth, you can just go do something.
Yeah, none of which I did.
And I feel like I'm participating in helping you beat yourself up over this now. But I'm just saying, that to me, that's a shot across the bow. That's one of those things that you know, you were presented with and you didn't do anything at the time. Again, there's guilt versus shame, right, is a good thing. It's like, okay, what could I do different next time? If I see this in the future next time, what will I do? And then commit to doing it, and then do the action. And once you do the action, it will strengthen your resolve to be an actor versus an observer in the future. And I think we need more actors. Now, again, I don't want anybody to go over the top with this and be listening to this and thinking, oh, well, good, I like fights. I'm going to go get involved in anything I can and see if I can, you know, be the hero. That's not the point. The point is, what can you do to make the situation better, right? And I guess the first question is, can I? Yeah. Is there something I can do? Yeah. Right?
Well, so I'll give a different angle on this, because this comes to mind now as you're sharing that. So we have a situation where, and again, I've shared this before for those of you that have been, you know, faithful listeners to this, and I work for an organization that we work with victims of human trafficking. So there was a series of movies that came out over a number of years, and the whole Taken franchise with Liam Neeson, which is not an accurate depiction of what human trafficking looks like in the United States. But then there was another movie that really gained a lot of press and was shown in a lot of circuits that were talking about international exploitation of children, and it got people really fired up and really angry. And I got a ton of people who wanted to volunteer with our agency, but they wanted to kick down doors, beat heads, and take names. And that is not what we're about. That is not something that we want to participate in. And so there's kind of the other arm of cognitive dissonance. You've got somebody who's out, or several somebody's outraged over what they've seen. They want to be the hero. They want to ride in on the white horse. They want to, you know, beat somebody down. And that's not our approach. That's not our place. And we are not a law enforcement agency.
No, and that's where education and awareness comes in. It's like, okay, well, I appreciate you've just seen this movie. I appreciate the fact that you appear to be passionate about this. Listen, as an agency, we've thought about this for a long time, not just since we saw the movie.
Right.
And here's our approach. And if you'd like to join us in that approach, you are more than welcome. We don't advocate this particular way of doing things because we think it does more harm than good. It puts people in danger and it doesn't help the situation. However, if you want to go off and do that on your own, fine. You're not going to have our blessing. We're not going to do it together. You know, those kinds of conversations can be had. I think a curious question to ask in that situation is, do you think that's going to help the situation? Do you think that's going to make the situation better?
Right. Right. Yeah, it's complicated. And for somebody who's gotten really emotionally stirred and feels like they want to go in and they want to go in now, to talk somebody off the edge is a challenge in and of itself. But then to talk them into, this isn't a quick solution, this is a long game, that does something mentally, and it does something kind of to your spirit, and it kind of squashes the willingness to be involved at all.
Yeah, and that's the big balance, isn't it? It's like, okay, look, I've got somebody standing in front of me that might be helpful in some way. Can I redirect that into something useful? And then that whole thing comes into what we were talking about last week with justice is, you know, is your definition of exactly the right way to help the true 100% correct one?
Right.
Or could it use some modification by these other folks? Can we get them involved somehow in a way that is not what we believe harmful to the situation, but takes advantage is the wrong word, helps them take that stirring in their heart, which we don't want to put down,
right,
and help them do something useful with it.
Yeah, to not choke out the passion and compassion, but to redirect it into something less headstrong.
Less headstrong, yeah.
Well, so I would love feedback from you all as you think through this. Are there situations where maybe you didn't act or you didn't engage and kind of had that pang afterward? And what were some of the thoughts that were going through your mind? Or maybe conversely, maybe you did jump in and maybe you're jumping in and taking action did not have the desired outcome that you were hoping for. What are some of those moments of cognitive dissonance that you have encountered along your journey? And what are some of the questions that you asked yourself, maybe of yourself, of your background, of your belief system, your values, all of the things, or of the situation at large? And so always am fascinated by the stories and how you all use curious questions to just do life. So please do share some of those with us. You can find a contact link right there on our website, which is curiositynotjudgment.com. And then of course we get some rich comments on the YouTube channel, and always love hearing what you have to say. Any closing thoughts?
No, I think that staying curious about our own actions and how we can kind of act our way into better societal beliefs, cause those good ripples in society, and maybe do a little bit towards, you know, either you're part of the problem, part of the solution, right? So little bits of actions towards making the world a better place.
All right, well, take baby steps of goodness and kindness towards each other, and let's see where it goes. So thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week right here on Curiosity Not Judgment. Have a great week.
Take care.